going on, guys? We have something special we want to bring to you today, and I brought Robbie Wheaton along with us. Robbie Wheaton has a YouTube channel, Robbie Wheaton. He's been a gunsmith for over 20 years. He's been a competitive shooter, 3-gun, steel challenge, I mean, you name it. Robbie's done it. And so I thought it'd be great to bring him in and talk about something that to me is very important if you're concealed carrying. The big thing with concealed carry is we get into a rhythm of the two hands.
Oh yeah.
You know, we've got that strong support hand. We're firing the gun. We have control over it. It's really the best way to shoot, and it's just more accurate.
You're overall you're more accurate. You're more stable. It's a more stable shooting position, and that's why most people are trained to shoot now with both hands.
Right. Well, even in competitive shooting,
absolutely,
I mean, you want to have that two-handed. Yep. But there are times where one-hand shooting is that's the only option, and one of the things that led us to this video was I was taking some jiu-jitsu. We were doing some controlled falls, and I landed square on my shoulder to the point to where it actually adjusted my shoulder blade, and I can only lift my arm about halfway. It's getting better, but one of the things that really kind of was an eye-opener was all of a sudden I had all these right-hand holsters. I have all these options, and I thought I can't really draw my firearm from my right hand, and I need to be able to do something with my left. And I really didn't have a lot of options because I just hadn't thought about it. So this is, first off, I want you guys to think about what would be your option. Now, one of the big things that came around from this was I had just done a review on the Black Hawk Tech Lock. It's a moldable holster. It was part of the holiday gift guide from Get Zone. And it's an ambidextrous, it's a pocket holster, or you can put it in between your belt. Really, it was a great option for me. And I was able to carry my actually it's the Ruger LCP Max, which has 10 rounds of 380. Also, what that does is it allows me to have a lesser recoiling firearm for my weak hand. And I'm going to be shooting it one hand. One of the things, and Robbie and I were talking about this a minute ago, was Tom Givens at Target Master. He's out in Memphis, and I was taking a class from him one time, and he said that 80% of gunshot wounds are to the extremities. So if you're in a gunfight, the possibility, if you're hit, is going to be probably in your arms or legs.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. But being able to transition from your right hand to your left hand, or your left hand to your right hand, and be comfortable shooting that firearm with your right hand and with your left hand, and know that you can make accurate, reliable hits in a non-stressful situation or a stressful situation is very important. You know, it's one of the things with competitive shooting that we've done for years and years is work on transitions from your right hand to your left hand to your right hand, shoot strong hand, shoot weak hand. And I've done it so much that I am as comfortable with my right hand as I am with my left hand. I'm wrong-handed, so my left hand is my dominant hand, unlike all these wrong-handed people beside me over here. But being able to transition from one hand to the other quickly, smoothly, efficiently, and safely is very important.
And I think safety is a big part of it.
Absolutely. It's very easy to, if you're not used to doing it, to transition from one hand to the other, and your finger instinctively wants to go immediately into the trigger guard, which is the worst place that it can be when you're transitioning a firearm and reestablishing your grip from one hand to the other. So learning how to transition from one hand to the other hand, and then working on the actual shooting portion of it with your weak hand, one-handed only, is very, very important.
Right. And, you know, that was one thing, because I had been training quite a bit, you know, and I'll tell you guys, you put that left hand, one hand out there, if you're right-handed or your weak hand, it is a totally different shooting experience. Even with your right hand, if you're right-handed, even with your strong hand, I should say. When you're bringing up that gun with one hand, the way the recoil functions, I mean, it changes everything. The way you get your sights. And honestly, I'm not near as accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you've really got to take your time. If you get shot, it's one thing, but if you injure yourself, it's another possibility. In fact, that's probably a greater possibility.
Right, and you still want to be able to protect yourself. You still want to be able to carry. You still want to have a firearm on you in case you're in a situation where you need one, but you need to be able to feel comfortable drawing and shooting from your left hand or your right hand, whichever is your weak hand.
Now, one of the things that, and we've talked about this a little bit in some other videos, but we've been talking about revolvers, keeping it as a backup.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of law enforcement, now that I've been asking questions, do this. They keep a small little revolver, 38 or even 357 Magnum, in their left pocket. And when they come up to a traffic stop, if there's a problem, it's much more difficult to draw from your right hand, if you're right-handed, and to be able to engage a threat. With the left hand, you can just pull it out and you immediately have a firearm right there. And it's one of those things that, it gives you a transition to be able to use that. Which that's not necessarily applicable to this in a sense, but yet being able to have a left-hand option, even in your pocket, makes it nice if you injure yourself, and that's the way you want to carry. There are some holster options, but you've got to decide. You're going left-handed. If you're like me, I have 2,500 holsters for the right hand, and no options for the left hand.
Well, and then you have to decide how you want to carry as well, whether you want to carry outside the waistband, inside the waistband, small of the back, appendix, in your pocket, and then the type of firearm that you want to carry. Because a lot of times you may not feel as comfortable with your everyday carry pistol as you do maybe with something a little smaller, like you were saying, a little lighter caliber that has a little less recoil, is a little more controllable with your left hand.
Right.
So it makes a big difference.
Like 10 millimeter.
Right.
I mean, I like carrying sometimes my Glock 29.
Mm-hmm.
I just like carrying it because it's, it's about the size of a Glock 26. And let's say that I'm in bear country, because that's typically when we're out in the woods. In fact, when you and I go hunting, that's what we carry. We carry 10 millimeters or sidearm. What if something were to happen to our strong hand? Then we're drawing out a 10 millimeter weak hand with one hand. And can you control that? Can you control, 45 ACP? So that is also a factor. If you're like us, we have different firearms that we like to carry and do things with. Are we proficient? And it may be something that you really should consider for your standard sidearm.
Right.
You may be like, well, I'm going to carry this big, I can carry a full-size 1911. Mm-hmm. Then train left hand shooting that 1911.
And not just train shooting it. One of the big things, especially if it's a pistol that has a grip safety on it or a pistol that has a manual thumb safety, train manually disengaging that thumb safety and re-engaging that thumb safety with your weak hand, because it's different.
That's right.
It's completely different. It's like if I transition with a 1911 from my left hand to my right hand, I draw from the holster and then transition. I take the safety off with my left thumb and I press the pistol into my right hand to get my grip. And then I go to shoot with my right hand or my support hand. But it's a different, and I don't grip the pistol. I cup it in the front and flip the safety, and then that way I can drive my hand in the back and use my hands kind of like a push-pull.
Right.
Push it in, and then establish my grip to where I can shoot weak hand.
Right. And I'm sure that's come from competitive shooting.
It has. It's a very efficient way to do it. It may not be it's the most efficient and the fastest. It may not be the safest way, because you don't have as much control over the grip of the gun when you just have the front strap of it in your hand and the thumb safety. So there's other ways that you can transition, like the pancake where you push it into your hand and grab it, versus that. But that's a faster, more efficient way to transition.
Right. And when you're in a threat, you want to make it as quick as possible.
That's right.
But you also want to make it as safe as possible, and you don't want to shoot innocent bystanders. Now, for me, a lot of times when I'm doing reviews, and it's funny, there for a while I was doing a lot more left-handed shooting. And then I just got to where I was doing right hand, just single shooting. So, it's keeping that training regimen going. Guys, you go to the range, at least fire a magazine with just one hand.
Yep.
Now, one thing I've seen quite a bit, active self-protection. John Correa does a great job. A lot of surveillance, actual shootings that happen, robberies, things like that. I've noticed that a lot of times people are using one hand when they draw.
Yep. They absolutely do. And it's one of those things where a lot of times in a self-defense situation, whether you're right-handed, left-handed, whatever, say both hands are still good. Nothing's happened to you yet. Everything's good. but you're in a situation where you have to draw your pistol. You may not have enough time to draw your pistol and get it all the way out to make a shot, both hands on it to make a shot. You may end up shooting from what's called retention, which is basically the pistol is right here. It's way down low. You have enough time to jerk it out of the holster and shoot. I had a friend of mine was by the house yesterday, and we were talking, and he's in law enforcement, and he was telling me about a shooting that he was in a few years ago, where he pulled this guy over. It was at night, walked up to the car, got his license and everything. The guy got out of the car. He walked back to his car and radioed it in, and found out that he was wanted for murder, and called in for some backup. He puts his radio down, and he turns around to look at the guy and was talking to him, and the guy said, "Well, as long as we're waiting on backup to get here," and then just turned and rushed him. You know, conversational tone, wasn't excited about it, wasn't nervous or anything, no anger or anything, just cold, you know, and turned and rushed him. And he had enough time to grab his pistol, jerk it out of the holster, and shoot from right here. It was as far as he was able to get out with the gun. And even with that, he had to push the guy off of him to create a little bit of separation, to give him just a little bit more time to get his gun out of the holster. And you know, he did. He shot the guy, and the guy ended up expiring. But he survived the situation because of his ability to be able to shoot from retention. And that's one of the things, you know, one of the first videos you and I did back, way back.
Yeah.
That was one of the things we were working on, was keeping somebody off of you, drawing and shooting from retention. And I think it's a really vital skill that everyone should practice and work on and become proficient with.
Well, if you're in close proximity to someone, you know, extending your firearm out, they can take it, they can stop it. And so that is also a reason why. I know a lot of times we were at tactical response, actually, and doing a lot of that kind of stuff, getting right up next to the target, putting out our hand, and then firing into the target at like bad breath distance.
Yep.
I mean, it's right there.
Contact distance.
And it's definitely a different experience. Yeah, Robbie and I were doing that years ago when I was still, when I first started my channel. I did one segment where I was shooting from the hip into a target that was up close. And so that's also a reason why you need to be able to shoot with just one hand. If you're in a close proximity to someone and you put your muzzle up to someone, it can knock it out of battery.
Absolutely.
This is a Glock 26. It is unloaded. There's no magazine. What we're going to do is demonstrate how this gun can be made inoperable if it's pressed. So if an attacker comes up close and you bring it here, if that gun is at all pressed, the slide, it locks just like this. I mean, it just can be a little bit, as long as it knocks it out of battery at all. Now, one thing you can do is, some guns especially have a little more of a protrusion out of the front of the frame with their guide rod. If you have that, you can still fire it. So for one thing you could do is to angle the gun down, the butt of the gun down, and that'll allow for the striker to strike. Now we have a loaded Glock 26. Here, if we press it, we have a dead trigger. If we bring it up under like this, you're going to fire. That's going to allow the striker to fire. One thing that did concern me was once I pulled the trigger with the gun out of battery, I was afraid that it would disable it, but it doesn't. It remains cocked.
This is one other thing to go with, as far as, you know, safety first, being able to shoot and to shoot accurately and to have experience with weak or single hand shooting, but also reloading.
Yes.
Reloading's a big deal. If you've got one hand, it can be very difficult to reload. Now, it's become more and more prominent where people are talking about this.
Yep.
I personally like to have a shelf on the back of my sight.
Yep.
Not just the Novak style where it's just smooth, but where I can actually take that sight, I can put it on my belt, I can put it on a table, rack the slide, you know, I can put it on my boot if I'm down on the ground and hit it and be able to rack the slide.
Absolutely. It's just a hook, something for the sight or the slide to grab hold of to give you enough leverage to push against to get it to chamber that next round. Or if you have a jam in the gun, to be able to clear a jam in a tight situation like that.
If you have a red dot on your firearm, that makes it even easier
It
to be able to rack that slide. But, you know, train that way. Again, when we were at Tactical Response, we did quite a bit of training with weak hand manipulation drills And it really, it keeps some of the surprise off of it,
Yeah.
I think. You're already in that bad situation.
That's right.
But also, and I was just thinking, a lot of times, and it's according to the gun you're carrying. If you're carrying a safety, frame-mounted safety on your firearm, which a lot of people now are carrying your striker fire pistols with no safety. I personally prefer that. I think it gives you both the
benefit
ambidextrous, really.
and the benefit of a revolver with the safety, or your safety is essentially your trigger with the internal safeties in the gun, but it gives you the benefit of being faster, like with a revolver, but then the extra capacity and the larger grip and longer sight radius and everything of a semi-automatic pistol.
Right. But sometimes I carry 1911.
Yep.
And, honestly, I don't really care about having ambidextrous safeties on it. I haven't really considered that too much. I mean, yes, it can be good in doing some stuff. But now I'm thinking, wow, if I'm shooting weak hand, having that ambidextrous safety could be a lifesaver.
And mag changes are something that a lot of people never consider in a defensive situation. If you're in a defensive situation, you're down to one hand and now you're down to no ammo in your gun, you've got to reload it. How are you going to get that magazine into your gun? The easiest way to do it is to drop your magazine, reholster the pistol with a slide lock to the rear, grab your magazine out of your magazine pouch, put it in the gun with it in the holster, because the holster is doing a job of your support hand at that point of holding the gun. Put your magazine in, gun back out, and then either rack off of the sight, or if you can get to it and manipulate it, the slide release on the pistol.
And also a malfunction.
Right.
If you have a malfunction, it's the same thing. You've got to be able to drop that magazine and reload. And you're right, putting it in your holster is definitely the best way to do it.
And a lot of people think, well, okay, so I train with my handgun. I'm proficient with my handgun with my right hand. I'm proficient with my handgun with my left hand. It's got ambi safeties on it or no safeties on it, and I'm used to using those. What about with a long gun, your rifle or your shotgun? How often do you train with your rifle? How often do you train with your shotgun, right-handed or left-handed? If you're a hunter, you're setting up in a tree stand or a box blind, you know that a deer never walks out. If you're right-handed, he never walks out on your left side or out in front of you. He's going to come out on your right side, or he's going to come out behind you in an angle and a position that's going to, in a lot of cases, force you to have to shoot with your weak side shoulder. And it's something that, if you've never trained it, it's something that's totally different. You bring your rifle up, you can't find the reticle and the optic, everything's all blacked out. You're moving your head all around trying to find it. You're in an awkward shooting position. So if you shoot a long gun, rifles or shotguns, make sure that you train with that firearm, both with your right hand and with your left hand, not only for hunting situations, but for defensive situations as well.
Right. So, guys, we'll just go ahead and recap it. But the big thing is your possibility of having to go one hand or weak hand is a high probability. And it's enough to where really that should be part of your training. Going to the range and just shooting targets, both hands, getting that full recoil and being able to control it. But also knowing the recoil impulse. That's probably one of the big things with shooting with one hand is you learn that it's a different recoil impulse. It shoots differently. One thing that I recommend is to actually, just like you're pointing your finger, you don't point your finger at someone, you point it kind of like this at an angle. And so being able to grab that firearm and give it just a slight cant, not this, but just that slight cant, it's a more natural shooting. And then when the recoil comes, it's funny because it just kind of rocks.
Right, it tracks your arm, the motion of your arm.
And you get used to that. Have some kind of holster system that you can transition to if you're injured. And then secondly, be able and be proficient to shoot that way and to draw that firearm and to know your safeties.
Yep, be able to manipulate all the functions of that firearm, both with your strong hand and your support hand.
And then when it comes to reloading, guys, highly recommend on a self-defense firearm to have that little shelf. Hopefully we've given you some thought, and that's the big thing, guys, is put some thought into the possibility of having to go one hand or even more weak hand. Practice with it, train, put that into your regimen, because it'll just give you more tools for your toolbox, but it's also a big possibility if you ever find yourself in some kind of self-defense situation. Guys, thanks for being with us today. I know this was a little bit different, but it really hit home to me, and then I thought, man, this is a very important subject to talk about. And so again, check out Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel. Also Wheaton Arms, and Robbie does some really incredible custom gun work, and carries a lot of different Glock aftermarket parts that are just exceptional. And a gunsmith for over 20 years. So it was really great to have him come in here and join us today. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. Vital in a self-defense situation, is that, so, this 10 minutes will be great. It's going to be hard for us because we're used to an hour. We're used to an hour.
The magic of editing.
Yeah, definitely. We'll just pull it out. Yep. We're doing some controlled falls with jiu-jitsu, and I landed.
Kung Fu fighting.
This is not live. Stop that. Okay. All right. I was fighting the floor. Those cats were fast as lightning. I wasn't so fast. Okay, good. Well,